What? They want me on the back lot? I'll be right over. And action. Hi, welcome back to Show and Tell. I'm Billie, and this is a knitting podcast. I try and deliver something fresh and new to you every week. I've been a little bit slow on the uptake because I have a couple of interviews in the works. They're really both completed. I'm just waiting for two pretty famous members of the Knitterati to get me onto their busy schedule so that they can be in the chat with us when we premiere those episodes. Probably that'll be after the new year. I was hoping to get it in before the end of the year, but sorry, you have me today instead. Oh, well, I do have some acquisitions. I do have a lot of progress because I haven't seen you for a while. I've been interviewing people, but one-on-one with me you haven't had for quite some time. And I also have some like knitting newsy kinds of things, not the least of which is that at the end of January is the annual Vogue Knitting Live in New York City at the Marriott Marquis. I know a lot of you are looking forward to that, especially the people who perhaps didn't make it to Rhinebeck this year. Maybe New York City is an easier destination to arrive at. So I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there all 3 days. I'm also going to be there on Thursday because I'm taking a course with Deborah Newton, so I can try and get a better fit for my sweaters, and whatever I learn, I may be able to pass along to you. But on Saturday morning, starting at 9, it really doesn't open until 10, but for people who have disabilities and other special needs, immune compromised, they're opening an hour early. So I will be there starting at 9 up until 11:30 at the table for the Big Apple Knitters Guild. I can't tell you exactly where it's going to be. It's usually outside of the marketplace. So I don't know if it's the 4th floor or the 5th floor, but if you look around at those tables outside, you should find me if you're there early on Saturday morning. So you might have noticed the elephant in the room. It's not exactly elephant color, but here is my latest finished object, the Hollyhock Wrap, the Hollyhock shawl. It's one of those two. I'll get the right one. By Catherine Lee Abrams. I had shown it to you while it was in progress, but here is all of it in its full glory. I'm very excited to say that it's finished. It was a little bit of a slog, I must say. This herringbone stitch gets to be repetitive, tedious, boring after a while. Interesting in the beginning, but there's miles and miles of it, and you do a very similar stitch on the front as well as on the back. On the back, it involves purling with these pass slip stitches over, and on the front, it's knitting with pass slip stitches over. So it's written in an interesting way, though, so you get to break up the knitting a little bit. The first thing you do is knit this triangle with the bobbles and the open lace work. And then you continue on in herringbone. The project involves 4 skeins. I used linen quill. It's not the yarn that's called for in the pattern, but Pearl Soho gave me the go-ahead and told me it would be comparable to the yarn that they called for. And linen quill, of course, is one of the Pearl Soho yarns. When I got through 2 of my 4 skeins, I paused to go break up the monotony and do some of the other things. I wanted to make sure that I would have enough for 2 of these tassels, enough yarn. So I made the 2 tassels so that I would lock in this quantity of yarn and only knit with the balance of the yarn that I had on hand. That was one thing I did. I also went ahead and knit the second triangle. That was put on hold until I finished doing all of the herringbone. And then you come back and you graft this triangle to the herringbone. I don't have a lot of experience with grafting, so I was glad in a way that I was going to be grafting here, because if I didn't do a really beautiful job, there's so much else going on here that nobody's looking at just that specific row. I hope that that set me up for success when I go to graft an upcoming project, which I'll show you in a minute. But before I do, let me take off my microphone, because I want to demonstrate how I'm going to style this. There's lots of different ways that you can, but I'm probably going to start with this side here and then wrap around. I could just wear it like that, of course, but since it's long enough, I'm inclined to come all the way around. And then I'll just make adjustments until I get it to be, you know, comfortable. And I might have started this too low. Let's try that again. There we go. I'm really happy with it. I'm happy with the color, because for me, this lavender, it's called purple smoke, but for me, this color is kind of neutral. I'm wearing it with navy, but obviously it would go great with gray, great with black, great with blues, even some greens it'll be terrific with. So my winter coats are generally black. So I had that in mind when I selected this color. I have to take it off because this is more for outer wear than indoors. So pardon me for removing it so quickly, but I certainly wanted you to see that. I'm a naughty girl because I have not yet wet blocked it, and there's still a couple of ends, not so many ends to weave in, ends from the tassels, how I attach them, but I still have a couple of little strands hanging out. I'll get to it, but I wanted to show it to you, so please forgive. Okay, the other project that I mentioned, which you haven't seen in a while, is a scarf that I'm knitting with extra fine merino from Color Mart in the UK. This is left over from another project that was a color work project. It's an all over lace scarf. It's called the Ibiza. Here we go again. Ibiza shawl, Ibiza wrap, something. I'll put the name on the screen. So in the past, I have shown you by wrapping it around my neck how much progress I had made. So here you can see it's quite a bit of progress since the last time you saw it, but not only that, I've started the other part. I can't say half because I don't know if I'm going to have double this length or not, but the pattern is, hang on a second. The pattern is a 32 row repeat. So as long as I end this on row 32 and this on row 32, they'll be ready for grafting one to the other. Now, with the previous scarf, as I mentioned, I was grafting stockinette to herringbone. At least one side was stockinette. Here, It's a mashup of knits and pearls and yarn overs, and yeah, that's it. In grafting, one thing that I do know is you have to graft a knit to a knit, a pearl to a pearl. Typically, you're doing stockinette, so it's all knits to all knits, and there's a whole procedure for winding your yarn through so that it's a continuation of the all knits. This is going to be quite a bit trickier. It's not going to be knit off, pearl on, pearl off, knit on. It's going to be some other scheme of that. I would love to hear from some of you if you have ever done anything like that. It will certainly be a first for me. Now, this project has been on my needles for quite a while. I was having a hard time using my ChiaoGoos. It was just completely too slippery, and I didn't have anything this thin in wood or bamboo. So I invested in these ergonomic needles, and I will say, even though they were rather expensive, they are helpful. They have a hexagon shape. The yarn, sure, it still glides, but I don't have to grip the needles so hard to keep these tiny little stitches on. And let me tell you, the last thing you want to do is drop a stitch in here, because it'd be really hard to find it. Yes, if it was on the previous row, you have a pretty good chance of finding it. But because of, I don't know if I can show you, because of how there are these yarn over perforations and pass slip stitch over situations, knitting through the back loop, purling through the back loop, it's kind of complicated. And I'll admit, I'm not perhaps sophisticated enough knitter to drop down and do knitting through the back loop and yarn overs and slipping stitches over to recreate what's here. Can it be done? There's no doubt in my mind that it can be done, but I think that's for super, super advanced knitters. If you've done anything like that, please comment. Let us know how proficient you are and if you have any tips or tricks for that. So this is quite a bit of progress since I last showed it to you, because I have all of this. I don't think you saw any of this before. So it's growing. For me, this is a project that takes up absolutely no space. I can put this in any handbag pretty much that I own. And it's something that's easy for me to just grab and go with. Let me show you my notebook. Normally I have my patterns on my computer screen, but I don't take my computer with me. And sometimes looking at it on my smartphone is not that easy. So I have handwritten tiny little print. But if I'm on the subway, for example, I can have this right in here, and I just am using one line at a time. It's really doubtful that I would get through more than one or two rows on the subway. So I just focus on that row, and I have a system for marking off each time I've done it. So even if I put this aside for several weeks, I can come back to it and know exactly where I am, which is wonderful. Another thing that's a little bit specific to this pattern is there's no purl row. Very often in lace, you have a complicated row, and then you have a relief row that's purling back. And then you do a complicated row and relief row purling back. My other work in progress, this, which we haven't talked about at all, is like that. There's a purl row. Oh, it's delightful when you get to that, because you just like whoosh, fly across that row. But this doesn't have it, so it takes a while to get through one or two rows. Keep an eye on this. It's in progress. It will be completed. I can't tell you when, and I'm not in any rush, but this is the thing that I'll pick up if I get frustrated with something else or I need a break from something else. So I can always come back to it and, like I said, find exactly where I left off. Okay. I think that I had told you in a prior episode that I had acquired 8 balls of this soft kid from Germany. Okay, from here you can see it better. So I think GGH is the brand. I forget now. It's Mohair, but it's not the very fine mohair that people are blending with other things. I'm knitting on, I believe, a size 7 needle. The pattern that I'm using, I got out of a book at the library. There's barely anything about it on Ravelry. It's called the Rimska sweater. And I've talked about this a little bit before. Sometimes when I'm knitting a sweater, instead of spending time knitting up a swatch, I just jump right into knitting the sleeve. And if I get lucky and I get a fabric that I like, that work hasn't gone for naught. So that's what I did with this project. The sweater is knit in pieces from the top down. So there's 2 fronts, 1 back, 2 sleeves. I started with just 1 sleeve. I wasn't doing 2 at a time initially. And I knit partway down to just see if I liked the fabric. I liked how it looked. And because this is not the yarn called for and it's not the same gauge as the yarn called for, I went ahead and knit the very smallest size, extra small, which I'm not, hoping that I would get in the zone with it. So I didn't knit a whole sleeve. I just knit part of the way down, enough so that I could do the same amount of knitting on the back. So I knit down maybe 5 of these repeats. And then I basted these 2 together and put it around my back and around one shoulder to see if it looked like it would fit. And what I found was it looked like it was too wide on every front. So I didn't rip back to the beginning. I only ripped back a couple of repeats to where it was narrower and cast on the second sleeve to catch up so that I would have then 2 sleeves going at the same time. And re-knit the back. The problem with all of what I'm describing to you is the lace chart. It's charted as well as written out. But the instructions tell you to either do the first 8 rows or the first 18 rows, depending on which size you're making, over and above a couple of pattern repeats. And you can't mix and match. In other words, you can't do 3 pattern repeats and 8 more rows in place of doing 2 pattern repeats and 18 more rows, because your side stitches and the instructions that they give for that will not match up to where you are in the pattern, in the motif at all. So what I did was I went to Stitch Fiddle and I charted it myself. And I made a chart for the back so that I could see, as I'm increasing, what's happening on the edges, where am I in the pattern repeat. And I did another chart for the sleeve, and I did another chart for the front. The front left and front right are very, very similar. Once you get past the section where you're increasing, all of these are straight down after you reach the underarm. So, long story short, I was able to get all of these 5 pieces organized and on stitch holders. Let me not lose my stitches here and telling you. And I basted all of them together and tried it on. I still think I'm a little on the too big side. but I really don't want to rip it out. So I'll probably have some additional ease over and above what I might otherwise like. But because this is really fuzzy and really grabby, whatever I'm wearing underneath it, I might need that extra ease so that I have mobility inside of it. So just to show you my progress, here are my two sleeves. The underarm is here, so I'm about 3.5 inches below the underarm. The back, sorry, it's not flat on the needles, but that's the top of the back. Here's the underarm. So I'm at about the same place, about 3.5 inches below the underarm there. And then my two fronts, I'm just a small amount below the underarm. The pattern calls for a lace knitted band to go around and then tie. I'm debating about whether I want to do that. I did knit up, let me show you that, in addition to everything else, because I also wasn't sure about how much mileage I would get out of this yarn. So I wanted to have everything going at the same time so I could really get a handle on how much yarn am I going to have. I did knit sort of like a mock neckband. I wanted to see how that pattern looked because my gauge differs from that in the pattern itself. This is a little wider than what I would have otherwise had. And I'm not sure that I want this to be that wide. So I'm contemplating perhaps buying satin ribbon and putting ribbon around with a tie in the front. It's kind of like a little lace bed jacket. I think it's very deco looking. And the best thing is I didn't have to buy all this yarn. So thank you to the person who donated it to the knitting club that I joined recently. Nobody else wanted it. A lot of them are newer knitters, and this just looked overwhelming. Okay, speaking of yarn clubs, I've made some lovely new friends, so I want to give a shout out to Michelle. I hope that you're feeling better real soon. She's been through a lot. And a special shout out to Sabina, who keeps bringing me gifts. Now, it is true, I helped her with her carbeth. She was a little confused about where the decreases were and where the stitch markers were and so forth. But somehow, we're all sitting around and there's conversation going. Somehow it came up that, oh, I know what it was. She had a progress keeper on her knitting. You see this adorable little thing? It's one of those nested dolls, Matryoshka doll. And I admired it. And she said, wait. And she opened her little kit and out came a second one, which she gave me as a beautiful gift. I think it's the cutest thing I've ever seen. I would love to have a pair of earrings like this. And I mentioned I've always been enamored of enamel. So if you can see, that's all little enamel, both sides, front and back. The next week, she came back with another gift for me, simply because I said that I love things that are enamel. Can you see this beautiful brooch? The camera's not picking up all the detail, but they're very pretty flowers. Yeah, I don't know what kind of flowers those are. Sort of, not Easter lily, but some wide flower, not a rose. Several different varieties of flower. This is not only set up to be dropped from a necklace, but it's also got a pin so you can wear it either way. And you can see on the back that it's enameling. Really lovely special gift. Then, since she was in a kind of Russian mode, we share some similar ancestry. She gave me another brooch. This is very typical Russian folk art. Heavily lacquered over paint. And there's a pin on the back of that too. So I am pretty sure that an upcoming project of mine, which happens to be called the Russian sweater, will be knit in colors to harmonize with this. So this is going to be the inspiration of my color choices. I was really thinking of making it in purple so that I could have it coordinate with the sweater and some other yarns, because there's like top stitching on it. And I have a lot of things that are in the pink and purple, and I thought that would all match together. But when I came into possession of this lovely pin, I thought it deserves to have a sweater, a special sweater to wear it on. Like I wouldn't want to wear it on here. It doesn't tell any kind of story, but I think if I can get the colors hooked up. She gave them to me in this beautiful little box, such a cute box, and a very darling card with a little rabbit wearing a sweater and with his paper dolls, paper bunny dolls. Very sweet. But wait, there's more, because she knew that I like vintage, and she brought me a collection of vintage. I believe they're referred to as knitting pins when they're this thin. She spent a lot of time living in Australia and saw these in the window of a charity shop, and it drew her in. She bought the whole group of them. Here's the whole lot of them. And I'm going to show you one pair at a time, one size at a time. I think one pair is more fantastic or more fascinating than the next. Love all the colors you'll see. The thickest pair is what's called a size 6. This is the British system. I don't believe that this corresponds to a US 6 at all. I don't want to take the original label off, which says that they're made in England and they're called Bonnet. That's in quotes, so the name is Bonnet. This seems to be a very similar size, and that's a US 6. It's not going through. So it's not a US 7. This is a US 8. This is the thickest one of all of them. I think that these two pairs look to be very similar in size. Whoever was the original owner of these, they had at least one pair in every size, going from size 8 up to size 14. Now, remember, this is the old British system. The numbers have nothing to do with millimeters, nothing to do with our US current system. So they actually get finer as the number increases. This next pair, these are a US 5. I'm guessing that the material is celluloid. It's kind of a flexible plastic. Some of them are no longer perfectly straight. This one looks pretty good. I think all the ones I've shown so far are straight, not bent, but here you see that this one is curved compared to the one next to it, which is straight. I'm sure they can still be knit with. These also don't seem to have a number on the end, but let's give it the test. Ooh, this is a US 2.5. AKA 3mm. Now I think we're getting, oh no, I have these out of order. This is a US 3. So another pair of those. Anyway, let me skip over some of them. I'll just show you quickly. These are number 9s, UK sizing number 10s, number 11s, with this pretty orange color. These are also 11s, and I wanted to pull out my jeweler's loop because there is a name on the bottom of them that you might be interested in knowing. Let me see if I can read that for you. It looks like Millward, Milward, made in England. It says all of that on this little white head. That's why I needed my jeweler's loop to read it. But look at this color. So lovely. Okay, there's just a couple more sets. These are still pinned together with the original wrappers, a little metal band that says 12 on it. And I guess you could store them in this so they're always together. See, it's like slides out. I don't want to slide it all the way out, but that would be a good way of keeping them from getting separated. Oh, this might have a name on it too. Hang on. Oh, no, it says Keep Pair, Keepair. So those are the keepers. These are number 13s. They are not celluloid. These almost have like a metal feel to them with a coating. They're just plain gray, very industrial looking, not bent. And let me get you sizing on here. Now we're getting into really, okay, US 1 or 2.25mm. I have knit with US 1s. And then these are the last ones. These are labeled size 14 with this little wrapper. I don't want to slip these out, but let me see if I can get it to a point where I'll be able to slip it into my measure. They're really stuck. But we know it's smaller than US 1, so it's either 0 or 00 would be my guess. One or the other. Very fine. So tell me in the comments if you have knit on something smaller than a size 2 US or 2.75mm. What have you made at such a fine gauge? And another thing I would like to know from you is, have you ever knit with these vintage needles? Is it safe for me to try them out, or are they going to just crumble or crack with age? Because I wouldn't want to damage them in any way. But I think it would be interesting to knit with actual needles from probably close to 100 years ago, is my guess. So thank you so much, Sabina. What a beautiful gift. Another thing that I acquired in recent times is this tumbler from Kelly Vaughan, who appeared on a recent episode. I'll leave a link up in the corner where you can go see my interview with her. She was kind enough to send me a tumbler with my name printed right onto it. And bah, a little lamb. I guess she knew that I'm into pinks and purples these days. It's a lovely color. So check out her website. You'll find information in that video. Also, I'll put it in the show notes, so you too can go ahead and order. She has different sizes. She has mugs, all kinds of different colors and different motifs that you can have laser printed on. And the top has this sliding mouth, to keep the heat in. So thank you. That was a very thoughtful gift, Kelly. Appreciate it. A variety of things have come across my desk, aka my computer, pertaining to knitting or crochet. So I wanted to share some of these things with you. One thing is, I'll leave a link to a video about Shetland shawls. This video was made back in 1964, and the narrator is positing that these shawls were worth more than platinum or gold. And he gives you like what the daily current rate was for gold, etc., and compared it to what these Shetland knitters were charging for the beautiful shawls that they were making. She was charging 70 pounds for her shawl, which today would be probably in the $500 range. And you may know that an ounce of gold is nowhere near 500. So just a little food for thought and an interesting video to watch. The link will be in the show notes. Since there's a lot of Russian theme here today, I know we're not too happy with the Russians these days, but it is part of, not just part of my ancestry, but they have a long-lasting effect in the fashion world because of Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna and her affiliation with Coco Chanel, the famous Paris fashion designer. In the 1920s, Chanel had an opportunity to meet her, and they found that they had this common passion, embroidery. The Grand Duchess was the cousin, niece, and granddaughter of the last 3 Russian czars, born in St. Petersburg in 1890 and brought up in the opulence of the Romanov court. She was forced to flee her country after the 1917 revolution and found refuge in Paris in 1921. Amongst royalty, embroidery was considered a very regal pastime. So when she arrived in Paris, she set up this embroidery studio, and Chanel learned of the Kitmere embroidery studio and their marvelous creations and began working with her. The video that I'll provide the link to is a talk given by 2 women who are experts in this area, and one is more fascinating than the other. So I encourage you to go take a look, take a listen. On Saturday, February 3rd, the Knitting History Forum is having their annual conference online. It's not free, there is a fee for it, but there are a number of talks that all sound very interesting. A royal waistcoat re-examined, using reconstruction as a tool for understanding the creation of knitted liturgical gloves, the fascinating Korsnas sweater, which is in the National Museum of Finland, the case of Fair Isle knitted fishermen's caps, and another topic is yarns for knitting, the influence of twist. So I think that every single one of those talks sounds like it would be fascinating, and there are others, so you might want to look into that. I wish I had better news to give you on this next topic. At one of the knitting groups that I go to, I met a young woman who told me that her friend was a reporter for the New York Times, and we got to talking about, interesting things that have happened to us in the course of our knitting. And I told her an anecdote, and she said, "Oh, my friend is writing an article right now. I think she would love to interview you and hear that story." So I was interviewed by a New York Times reporter. Unfortunately, I was cut out of the article. She had a short word space. It's a lovely article about people who are knitting gifts for others, and sometimes they're not as well received as one might hope. The whole knit-worthy concept. I will leave a link to that article as well. And as long as I'm in this link giving mode, there was another article around the same time in the Times with a short stop motion animation of little mice and knitting sweaters and fixing stuffing in their bodies, which is about the therapeutic values that elderly knitters in Great Britain have been finding through their knitting. So look for a link for that one as well. So I forgot to tell you about another acquisition, obviously not knitting related, but you know that I'm the queen of killing the orchids and salvaging those little clips to clip together pieces of my knitting. I thought I would try my hand this time at a bonsai. Maybe I'll have a little more luck. So yeah, wish me luck. If you have any tips on this, happy to know about them. Okay, I think that's going to be a wrap for this year. I will look forward to seeing you on the other side of New Year's Day. Remember, there'll be 2 splendid interviews forthcoming. If you made it to this far in the video, I salute you. Please do me this favor. In the comments, just put some icon, a little smiley face, a feather, or something to let me know. That'll be our secret code. Let me know that you stayed until the bitter end. I really appreciate it. Thumbs up are also much appreciated. Other comments are delightful to read, not just for me, but other viewers of the podcast. So please comment early, comment often. Happy, healthy New Year to all of you. I hope this year has been better for you than it's been for me, and I hope that next year will be better for all of us, and that we can find peace in our world. Bye, everyone.